In a world full of remakes, sequels, and unoriginality, Coralie Fargeat's The Substance provides a refreshing and original screenplay about the pursuit of perfection with specific regards to the female experience. The movie follows Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Demi Moore, who, once a beloved actress in her heyday, has, in her 50s, resorted to one of the few avenues presented to female actresses of that age. Overhearing her network's executive, Harvey, played by Dennis Quaid, mercilessly criticize Elizabeth's age and longevity within the business, she becomes distraught and distracted and gets into a car crash on her way home. At the hospital, she meets an unusually handsome nurse who slips her a mysterious USB drive which contains an advert for the substance, a liquid which, when injected into the participants, creates a cell division releasing a much younger, stronger, and perfect version of the participant. Elizabeth succumbs to the temptation and places an order for the drug. We are told two important things about the substance. Firstly, that both parts of the participant, the younger and the older, are in fact one, meaning that any decision which negatively impacts the other is in fact a decision made by both parts of the participant. And second, that both parts of the participant must switch every 7 days in order to replenish their bodies. Any failure to do so will result in the participants aging rapidly. As expected, it isn't long before these conditions are gravely breached by Elizabeth's younger mutation, Sue, played by Margaret Qualley, who gets a taste for the attention that is showered upon her, resulting in her refusing to switch. Elizabeth pays the price for this by aging rapidly and dying in the most gruesome and gory match to the death I've seen on screen. With Elizabeth dead, Sue can now bask in the glory and adoration of her new fame until she can't. Elizabeth's death means that Sue is unable to replenish herself with Elizabeth's fluids, meaning that Sue herself starts to disintegrate rapidly. That too on the night of her New Year's Eve show, the night she has been working towards the second she broke free from Elizabeth's body. Unable to extract any restorative fluid from Elizabeth, Sue injects herself with some leftover activator and waits for a newer, younger, and prettier version of herself to reemerge. What reemerges instead is a monster who is slain by the audience at the live taping of the show in an extravagant, indulgent, and exhaustive bloodbath. It is safe to say that this movie, especially in the second half, is visually insane in the best way possible. The way in which common themes such as dissatisfaction, isolation, aging, and the quest for validation are presented in a visually satirical manner makes for what The Guardian calls a cheerfully silly and outrageously indulgent piece of gonzo body horror comedy. Comedy and satire are words thrown around in relation to this movie, which certainly surprised me at first because I don't think of this movie as a comedy. Sure, I laughed in moments, namely the satirical and cliched characterization of Harvey, but overall, I felt the more serious morals and lessons from the movie than I did the punchlines. When I watched the movie a second time round in a much more packed theater with mainly teenagers, The Guardian's assessment of this movie as a body horror comedy became more prevalent, though I do strongly disagree with the assessment of the movie as silly. Though the film deals with serious issues faced by women in a seemingly outlandish and brash way, it would be unfair and even a little sexist and dismissive to label a film that discusses the female experience as silly. Writer and director Coralie Fargeat addresses the outlandish and indulgent screenplay, stating that the movie was meant to express everything that I felt needed to be said without any restrictions because the movie is fundamentally about the violence of control, how we're told to be delicate. Think of the past when women had to wear clothes that tightened everything up. I really wanted to let it out. I wanted to explode and shatter everything in a violent and uncompromising way. Fargeat also discussed her inspiration for the movie, stating that she was influenced by horror movie titans like David Cronenberg and John Carpenter, as well as the movie Vertigo, whose theme was borrowed for the ending. When reading about Demi Moore and why she was selected for the role of Elizabeth Sparkle, it becomes obvious that there was no one more suited for the role. When talking to The Guardian about what drew her to the role, Moore states, "What really struck me was the harsh violence against oneself. It's not what's being done to you, it's what we do to ourselves." Throughout her career in Hollywood, Moore has received her fair share of scrutiny over her appearance, with executives telling her to lose weight and eat less, to receiving backlash about her age gap relationship with Ashton Kutcher. Even as far as one producer who couldn't understand why Moore's character in A Few Good Men didn't have sex with Tom Cruise, stating, "If Tom and Demi aren't going to sleep together, why is Demi a woman?" Fargeat was gripped by Moore's violent and unforgiving relationship with her body during the 90s and noughties, when Moore would starve herself, as well as exercise excessively to achieve the heroin-chic look, which was the blueprint for all models and actresses to follow. Clearly, it was Moore's experience of what it means to have an obsessive relationship with her body that allowed her to understand the interiority of Elizabeth Sparkle. What floored me about the movie was how little dialogue there actually was, and when dialogue was present, it was basic in its form. Considering that the screenplay was 2 hours and 20 minutes long, this is a fascinating achievement. What enabled the screenplay to get away with minimal dialogue was just how much it conveyed in its visuals, aesthetics, and sound design. For example, the substance and its usage is explained to us through the labels on the packaging, as well as the ominous voiceover that appears occasionally. The different lifestyles of Elizabeth and Sue are showcased aesthetically through the ways in which different colors are used. For example, bright and bold colors are used in the clothing and makeup that Sue wears, along with the set design of her fitness show. According to Fargeat, she knew she wanted Sue to have the poppy femininity of pink, which is a bit like the oldest living symbol for that kind of thing. As with Elizabeth, who, as she starts to age rapidly, the world around her becomes a sickly dark color, which is in part due to the windows being newspapered to hide her transformation. With regards to the yellow coat, Fargeat states that the yellow coat felt like it was right for her. "I wanted it to place her in a superhero-like space, representing her as Elizabeth sparkled before her transformation." This is certainly true. Elizabeth sports the coat when she decides to take control of her life. At the start of the screenplay, she wears the coat as she goes to collect the substance. Additionally, towards the end of the film, when she decides that enough is enough and she can't live with Sue, she wears the coat when going to collect the termination fluid, which she uses to kill Sue, at least for a little while. As well as symbolizing courage and control, the coat symbolizes the complete opposite too. The garment is used as a tool for Elizabeth to hide from the public, at first due to her celebrity, and later on to hide her disfigurement. Food is another way in which the different lifestyles of Elizabeth and Sue are presented. With regards to Elizabeth, food becomes a way she can punish Sue for taking advantage of her body, and in turn food becomes a pawn in the match of control between the two women. For Sue, food is an accessory to her sexuality. The only times we see her consume something is the scene where she drinks a can of cola and sucks on a lollipop. The cola scene is highly satirical, alluding to the sexual way in which female icons sell beverages in adverts. Think of the infamous Cindy Crawford advert, for instance. When Sue takes a sip of the soda, not only does the camera zoom in on her, capturing both her wet lips and the condensation on the can, but the music also slows down to capture the seductive nature of the moment, making for a satirical scene, poking fun out of the way in which these types of ads are stylized in real life. In addition to this, the lollipop that Sue eats is highly infantile, in contrast to the French cuisine that Elizabeth cooks later on in the screenplay. Diet Cola, a product that has become synonymous with pop culture and girlhood, helps to further the presentation of Sue as young. When talking about her inspiration behind the name Sue, Fargeat says, "To me, the name embodies a Marilyn Monroe vibe, like an old Lolita, baby doll, sexy icon type. It evokes the past, and subconsciously, it was a way for me to symbolically reference the images and representations of the past that shape today's expectations of what it is to be beautiful, sexy, and valued." As well as through Sue's name, the Lolita baby doll image is conveyed through the Diet Cola scene. In Nabokov's novel, Lolita, Humbert lusts after a young girl who is also said to have a childlike obsession with sweets and fizzy beverages. As a result, Sue's consumption of these childish delights works to enhance her youth. Sound is another way in which microscopic moments in the screenplay are heightened. During gory scenes, sound effects are used to enhance the discomfort of what is going on. For example, during the scene when Sue stitches together Elizabeth's flesh after breaking free from it, sound is enhanced to mimic the sensation of the needle slicing through flesh. This allows us to engage in the bodily sensation of pain, making the body horror genre more prevalent. Other times, when the microscopic details of the screenplay are cleverly heightened by sound effects. are the scenes when Sue extracts fluid from Elizabeth's body, as well as the opening shot of the screenplay, when the substance is injected into an egg yolk, causing it to mutate. Not only is the use of sound effects engaging and clever, but also necessary to the screenplay due to the lack of dialogue in the film, which, without the sound effects, would otherwise lead to a very quiet and disengaging screenplay. The interesting way in which sets and locations are used in the movie are worth expanding upon. Elizabeth's penthouse apartment allows us to gaze into her interiority. Located at the top of her apartment complex, the apartment offers a generous view of Los Angeles that is both visually accessible yet out of reach for Elizabeth due to the demise of her career. According to Fargeat, it was important for the apartment to have a timeless, old-fashioned, but also futuristic quality, so it could represent every age. The large window connects the inside and outside and lets Elizabeth gaze at her past, which is at one point taken from her. When Sue is reborn, the view becomes the future. When Sue's billboard is put up, the apartment's large windows serve as a constant reminder for what Elizabeth has lost and what she, through Sue, hopes to regain. According to Fargeat, the long orange corridor at the TV network represents Elizabeth's life. She started at some point at one end and then is finished when she reaches the other. This way, the corridor, which in reality is not that long, but is exaggerated through camera work to appear much longer, symbolizes the shelf life of women in Hollywood. The bathroom in the apartment where the transformations take place is clinically white and strikingly bare. This allows the bathroom to act as a canvas, allowing the transformations to take center stage without taking away much of the audience's visual attention. The movie is ripe with all kinds of symbolism, from Elizabeth's yellow coat all the way to the presentation of food. However, none of this is as prominent as the symbolism behind Elizabeth's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, through which the movie starts and ends. Elizabeth's star really is an indication of how she is treated not only throughout the movie, but also throughout her career in Hollywood. The scene starts with the construction of her star, which symbolizes her recognition as a celebrity who has achieved her worth in the industry. In the second shot, we see a silhouette of what is supposed to be a young Elizabeth having her picture taken by paparazzi on her star. This symbolizes the height of her career and beauty. During the next couple of shots, we see tourists walking past her star with the occasional stopping to take a picture of it. This kind of recognition very quickly decreases, symbolizing the fickleness of adoration and the replaceability of actresses once they have hit the prime of their careers. The star proceeds to get worn out with food and shoe marks, symbolizing the way in which Elizabeth is walked over by men like Harvey in the industry. At the end of the film, after Sue's monstrous mutation, is butchered by the audience, Elizabeth's monstrous head crawls to her star and waits to die, showing that despite everything, Elizabeth still clings onto the memory of her fame and celebrity. Here's something interesting that Demi Moore said in her Guardian interview stands out. But in the film, what does Elizabeth do with her shiny new opportunity? Goes back to the TV exec. She goes back to the aerobic show. She could have produced her own show or do things differently. But no, the need to have that same validation is there until we break our patterns. Similarly, Elizabeth's decision to die on her star is emblematic of her need for the same validation she had at the height of her career. And so, the movie becomes her quest for that. When her perfect version Sue is born, she indeed returns to Harvey and enjoys the praise and adoration she probably received from him when she was a bright new toy in Hollywood. This is the same validation Elizabeth chases throughout the movie through Sue. Consequently, this movie becomes a cautionary tale about the dangers that the quest for validation creates. The happiest Elizabeth is during the screenplay is probably when she becomes Eliza Sue. Ironically, the more monstrous she looks, the more happy and content she becomes, and the more willing she is to accept her fate. Unlike the scene where Elizabeth gets ready for her date with an old acquaintance, when Eliza Sue gets ready for her New Year's Eve show, she enjoys the process of dolling herself up a lot more. This is because having lost her good looks and knowing that this is the end, she has nothing left to lose and so can enjoy the fallout. The movie ends with Elizabeth waiting to die on her star, during which she is comforted by the memories of her former success. All in all, Fargeat creates a sympathetic, creative, and engaging story about the pursuit of validation, ripe with innovative ways of storytelling. Now it's your turn. Let me know whether you've watched The Substance and what your thoughts on it are. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite films.